everyone, it's Alice, and today I'm gonna be reading some 1-star reviews of some of my favorite books. Just because I think it'll be both interesting and funny. I obviously didn't come up with this concept, it's been around for ages, but I've never done it before, and it's gonna be interesting to see what people who don't like what I like think of the things that I like. I just think it's an interesting thing. I'm not usually like super concerned with if someone doesn't like a book that I like. I think that that's how life is and how it should be. Like, it's totally fine, but it is interesting. To make it a little bit more interesting though than just reading the reviews, I want to also try to predict what it is that people don't like about the books. Very general, but like when I fall in love with the book, I can usually tell like what kind of audience it wouldn't be for, or what kind of reader maybe wouldn't like it. And I like very particular things in books, and that's not everyone's favorite thing. So I'm gonna try to like predict a little bit in a general sense what it is that people are not vibing with. I might get all of it wrong, maybe I'm not as good at guessing that as I think I'm going to be, but we'll see. I'm also not gonna read like a million reviews just to try and find what I'm looking for, and I'm probably not gonna read like the longest reviews. I'm gonna try to find some fun and short ones, so this is actually like fun to watch. I will just do a small disclaimer though, this is just supposed to be for fun, and not liking a book is 100% allowed, and saying that you don't like a book is also totally allowed, and it's fine. We don't all have to like the same things, and we're all friends here. It's all good. We're gonna start off strong though with what is probably my favorite book. Like, this is my go-to answer when people ask me what's your favorite book. I have a lot of favorite books, but like this is probably at the top, and it's also a very popular book, and it's a book a lot of people have read. It's The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and I think that with this book, the people who don't like it are gonna call it boring. Like, that's gonna be a thing. They're gonna call it pretentious and too long, and that it like drags out. Like, that is what I think people are gonna say about this book. The first thing that pops up is already cracking me up. This is a part of a longer review, but I'm just gonna read the parts that are funny. It says, lowering my rate to 1 star because let's face it, this was awful and boring as fuck. Please shut the fuck up. Then the review goes into like what they like and what they don't like. It does say that it's like boring and nothing happens in it. And then at the end it says, anyways, I'm not sorry for rating this book 0.5 stars. If I could, I would rate it 0 stars. Save yourself. The next one is very short and to the point. It says, to be honest, if I wanted the thoughts of a bunch of classist elitists who know dead classic languages, I would just have dinner with my family. That's fair. Then we have someone who has DNF'd it, and this is like a sentiment that I see a lot of people feel with this book. It says, definitely not for me. It has a beautiful aesthetic, but it's beyond boring. I feel like that's a lot of people's experience with The Secret History if you're not into it, and I get it. Then we have another funny one. It says, everyone in this book should have died. Honestly, yeah. Then we have another very to the point one. It says, I wanted to give it 2 stars because it's not that bad, but I got a migraine from rolling my eyes. Which, I'm sorry you got a migraine, because migraines are the worst. But also, fair. I see it. This next one that I found is interesting. It says, the real tragedy here is that I am now dumber for having read this book. And then it says, Henry Winter, good sir, I could never hate you. No further comments. That is interesting, because Henry is one of the worst characters in the book, no? I have now also found a comment that calls this book pretentious. It's part of a slightly larger review, but it just says, pretentious wank. Which, I mean, I get it. It's fair. I think the last one I'm gonna do sums up what a lot of people who don't like this book think of this book. It says, the only thing more boring than rich cokeheads are poor cokeheads who aspire to be rich. Based on that, I would say that I was right in that a lot of people find this book very boring, which is totally fair. I get that it's not for everyone. I really love it, but I get it. I see what you mean. You're also really funny. Alright, so the second one we're gonna do is Hamnet by Maggie, which is a book that I absolutely fell in love with when I read, and I feel like I'm pretty confident in what others don't like about this book. I think it's gonna be the writing, because the writing is super descriptive, which makes it kind of like on the slower side. Maybe it feels a little bit dramatic or melodramatic, but I loved it. So I think that's gonna be a criticism, and I also think that people think that book is really slow, because it kind of is, but I really liked it, but it's not for everyone. The first one I came across is quite interesting because it talks about the characters, and it's quite interesting because the characters in that book is one of my favorite things, but the review says, grown. Another novel with a stereotypical, magical, beautiful, but rebellious, misunderstood witch/medicine woman, complete with the obligatory evil stepmother. Really? The most interesting character in this novel is a flea. The kestrel is a close second. That's really interesting to me because I love the characters in that book, especially the main character. Although, reading this review, I guess maybe it is a little bit stereotypical, but I really liked it. The next one says, DNF'd, to try hard a book, which I can see. Can't believe this book won the Women's Fiction Prize. Its writing is so superfluous. Overly labored use of adjectives and similes and commentary, cutting into critical junctions of plot development. It slows down the pacing so much. This is what I thought people would feel. Makes me feel like I'm reading snippets of beautifully written prose littered randomly. I really wanted to like this book, but I need to respect my own time and standard. 1 star. I totally get it because the writing isn't for everyone, but I just totally loved it. I don't know what it was, but I do kind of like almost like overly written books sometimes because I just do. The next one is short and honest. It says, made it 80% through before it auto-returned to the library, and I'm not sad. Another really to the point one says, long, descriptive, uneventful, and boring. Enough said. That's really funny to me because I kind of agree with all of these, but I still loved it. So it's just about different tastes with these things. The last one I'm going to do for this one is very to the point. Says, found myself wishing he would hurry up and die already so the book could get a move on. It never did. Then we're going to move on to a book that I recommend a lot, and I know that a lot of people have read it because I recommended it, and a lot of people who watch this channel love it. But it does have some 1-star reviews. It's Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Sukegawa. I think for this one, I'm gonna predict that people find it boring again. I think some people find it a little bit simple, and that I know that it's translated from Japanese, and a lot of Japanese translated books have a certain vibe to them, and not everyone gets on with that. So I think that might be a thing, but let's see. The first thing I see is a review that just says, I'm free! Oh, I'm sorry. Then we have a review that just says, it was so boring. And a review that says, so very, very boring, and only the suggestion of a plot. I would argue that it does have a plot, because things do happen in it, but it is definitely a character-driven book. And that's one of the things that I just absolutely love in books. Like, most of my favorite books are character-driven books, and if you're looking for like plot, this isn't the book to read. Then we have one that just says, who thought this would be a good idea? Most of the other 1-star reviews are a little bit longer, so I'm not going to read through them all, but I feel like I was right in saying that it's kind of like a boring book to some people, not a lot happens in it, which isn't everyone's jam, which is totally fair. Let's move on to the next book. Okay, next, let's do Little Fires Everywhere. This is actually a book where I don't quite know why someone would dislike it. Although, I know it's not for everyone because it's not everyone's like favorite themes, or like it's not everyone's type of book. But the thing that I could think maybe is like an issue is that it was like super hyped, so maybe some people went into it with really high expectations and they feel like it's overhyped. And maybe some people don't like it because it has a lot of unlikable characters. That's my guess. Let's see. So I see a lot of these reviews are like longer and they really go in depth, which is totally fine. I'm not going to read through all of them. And We're gonna do a short one, which is pretty funny. It says, cheesy, soap opera, ridiculous at times because it is so implausible. That's interesting. I don't know if I agree, but that's interesting. Okay, this one is pretty funny. It says, I don't understand all of the great reviews for this book. I could barely get through it. It was a culmination of little dramas everywhere, none of which were very interesting. That's fair. Okay, so I am seeing some reviews that are saying like they went into it with really high expectations. That's like they were disappointed, which is fine, but all of those are longer. So we're gonna do this next one, which is just funny. It says, okay, no lie, this was the worst book I've ever read in my life. Worse than The Goldfinch. Worse than The Sun Also Rises. I would choose a lifetime of clipping toenails and bathing in petroleum jelly before I glance at this book again. Oh god, that's so harsh. The thing that stands out to me in this one though is the mention of the goldfinch, which I actually really like. So I guess we just have very different tastes. I am seeing a lot of DNFs. I am also seeing a lot of mentions of Celeste Ng's other book, Everything I Never Told You, and people like love that book and that they don't like this one, which is interesting. But I can also see that that like messes with your expectations a little bit. But this next one is interesting. I haven't really thought about it this way, but it says, you don't like the court's decision, steal the baby and run. Yay! You don't like your family, burn the house down and run. You decided to break your promises even with a contract, take the baby and run. No consequences for all the irresponsible actions in this book at all. I am also seeing a lot of people DNFing this book, and one review says, I'm 2 chapters in and have decided the life is too short to spend any more time on this book. You should always DNF if you're not enjoying something, so I fully support your decision, even though I still love the book. Okay, let's move on to the next book. I feel like I was like semi-right about what people don't like about that book, but I also like a lot of the reviews are really in depth and they go into why they don't like it, and there were loads more like opinions about a lot of things in that book that I hadn't really thought of, but it's always interesting to read. Next, we are gonna do a classic. We're gonna do 1984, which I think people have a lot of opinions about. So this is an interesting one for me because the reason that I like 1984 by George Orwell is because of what it taught me. I think there are a lot of really interesting concepts in that book and a lot of things that I didn't really understand until I read that book, and that's why I like it so much. There are other things in that book that I don't really like, and it is one of my favorite books because of what it taught me and what it made me think about. Like, that's why I love it. The actual story and like the characters and stuff, it's like not my favorite thing necessarily. So I think one of the criticisms of this book is gonna be that it's outdated. I think it's gonna be like people feel like it's overhyped, and I think maybe that it's like slow and hard to get through because it kind of is. Okay, so the first thing that pops up makes me chuckle, and I just want to read it even though it's a little bit longer. It says, praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. I am finished with this beast of a book. My brain feels like sludge. I just want to crawl into a hole and forget all that was ingrained into my poor head. Why, oh why, did I have the noble idea to read such a monster? How am I supposed to rate such trash? I believe, like some of you, that this might have been better if I had read it in a class or with a group. Alone, it was fingernails to chalkboard miserable. I kind of get that, and I do think that there is a point to be made about like reading it in class or reading it in a group. I think it's the kind of book that you get the most out of it if you can discuss it with someone else. But yeah, I feel you. Then someone writes misogynistic shit, which is a fair criticism, I think. I thought that as well when I was reading the book. And then the next one says, get this book away from me. Why is this required reading? I'm dropping out. Then we have a 3-word review that instantly makes me like, I know exactly how you feel about this book. It says, I prefer 1989. I gotta say, there are a lot of really funny reviews for this one. Like, obviously it's a very popular book, so loads of people have read it. And I could go on and on, but we're gonna end it with this. It says, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. 1984 is the most boring book I have ever read. Fair. Okay, moving on, we're gonna do another translated book. I'm gonna do Strange Weather in Tokyo by Hiromi Kawakami, which I know is a book that it has a slightly lower rating. I love that book. There's something magical about that book to me, but it's also a book that I don't necessarily recommend all that often because I don't fully understand why I loved it so much, and two, there's a lot of stuff in that book that I totally get other people don't like. It's a little slow, it's a little boring, it's the kind of book that nothing really happens in it, and I'm sure that, that's not for everyone, which I totally understand. Okay, already we're starting off strong. It says, if he patted her on the head one more time, I was going to throw up. Yeah, that's fair. Then we have one that just says, just plainly boring, which is totally fine. Another one says, what the fuck was the point? It is a good question. I don't know what the point of that book is, but I really liked it being kind of pointless, I guess. Then one just says, no. Okay, you're allowed to say no, it's okay. Then we have a review that says, snooze fest, which is totally fair. We have one that says, it's in Swedish, it basically says, no, just no, which is also fair. We have one that says, one word, boring, which is fair. I think the general consensus is that it's a boring book, which, to be honest, it kind of is, but I loved it. Okay, let's just do one more book. We're gonna do Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I think that the criticisms of this book is gonna be like, it's boring. I'm realizing that a lot of the books that I love are boring to a lot of people, which is fine, but it's kind of funny to me. Sometimes I like reading boring books, but I think the criticism is going to be that it's boring, and also that it's just not what people expect, because I remember when I read it, it really wasn't what I expected, and the structure of it wasn't what I expected, and it's a story that so many of us know of, but when you read the book, it's the way we know of that story, it's taking on a life of its own, and it's kind of hard to predict what the actual book is like because it's different than what a lot of people think, I think. Okay, this first one is peak. It says, an annoying scientist and an ugly tall man fight over who is more depressed. The next one says, this has to be the most tedious thing I've ever read in my life. Fair, a lot of people think that book is boring. The next one says, Mary Shelley, I'm so sorry, but even the gayness couldn't save this book. I just love these kinds of one sentence reviews. I love reading in-depth reviews as well, but the ones that crack me up are the ones that you managed to put your whole opinion in one sentence. It's so good. This next one says, this book made me want to go commit. However, I do stand Miss Mary. She was a bad bitch. Then we have one that sums up something that I've heard after I read the book and I didn't think of when I read it, but it's totally valid. It says, you're telling me that a man who was ill for months after any minor inconvenience happened just casually went to the Arctic and survived the majority of it. Yes, yeah, he did. I don't know how, but he did. Then a lot of people are saying oh, this is such a slog, I really disliked it. I was excited to finally get around to it, but it was so boring, I didn't enjoy it. And then, let's end it on this one. It just says, thank fuck that's over. Okay, so that's gonna be the end of the video, and I have no idea if this is gonna be fun to watch, but my god, it was fun to make, because people, they just crack me up. Now, I would love to know if any of you enjoy reading one-star reviews of books that you like. I really like it. I do it sometimes just for fun, and I do it if I've just finished a book that I loved. I love just seeing the one-star reviews because I just think it's interesting, and a lot of them are really, really funny. I think that one-star reviews are more often funny than five-star reviews. A lot of the one-stars are just, it's just so hilarious. I hope you had fun with this, and again, this was just for kicks and for the laughs. And yeah, as always, thank you for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon.